I have a million questions, but I want to start with what you and the committee wanted us to take from today's incredibly emotional, compelling testimony from these witnesses.
Well, thank you. I think that there were two pieces of it. I think one was the factual basis, what calls were made, what pressure was made, and what attempts were made to create these plots of fake electors to send them to Washington. But the other side of it was this personal story, the personal toll that it took on elected officials, that it took on individuals like Ms. Shaye Moss, who works as a dedicated election official for over a decade, on her mother, her grandmother. I think the personal impact of this, and there are just thousands of people like Ms. Moss across the country who've been impacted by these lies and this pressure.
Yeah, I mean, bringing to life the reality for an election worker whose child was home alone when Trump's supporters, mobs of supporters, descended on their homes, really did, I think, refocus everyone on what this climate was like for election workers. But there's a through line. I mean, we asked Congressman Pete Aguilar after the last hearing if the president's indifference to hang Mike Pence was about an intended consequence or an indifference to violence. And I have the same question about showcasing all the violence put into motion by Donald Trump's words and deeds and lack of deeds by never condemning the violence. What is your sense on the violence that Trump instigates as a theme in these public hearings?
I think it's that human element of the human toll and sort of the visceral nature of the violence. I mean, we're familiar with the violence that happened here at the Capitol on January 6th. We've seen that video so many times. And I think many of us were loosely aware of, leading up to that, between the election and January 6th, that these types of demonstrations got out of hand at state capitals around the country. But when we saw the footage today of the same man who infamously was on the Senate floor wearing Viking horns in the same costume getup, really carrying forth the same actions, it looked to me like a rehearsal. I knew that this had been building and had been repeated around the country many times, but I think, through the work of the committee and seeing just how much all of these pieces lined up, the pressure in the states, it culminated in the pressure here at the Capitol and the pressure on Mike Pence that we described at the previous hearing.
The fake electors plot doesn't get as much airtime as the ellipse speech or Rudy Giuliani's combat by trial, but it may very well, by the committee's storytelling, represent the illegal conspiracy that directly involves Donald Trump. And I wonder if you can speak to your first point about laying out the facts of an illegal plot to overturn the election. Speaker Rusty Bowers was incredibly powerful for what he said and what he didn't say. I mean, he said there was no evidence ever provided, and he made clear they wanted him to overturn, to decertify. He started to say overturn and then changed his word choice to decertify. There was no drama in his recitation of the facts, that the facts clearly proved that the Trump campaign knew that there wasn't fraud in Arizona and they wanted a fake slate submitted anyway.
That was clear, and his testimony was so compelling in that. And he kept asking the questions. He's somebody who's truly is a public servant, and you could tell his dedication by his words, and it is so deep as to his faith rests on that obligation that he has to the oath. And, he kept being told, well, we need you to do this. And he kept saying, well, show me the facts. Where are the lists of these names of people, who are not citizens, people who are deceased? And he keeps asking over and over again, and they never produce anything. Yet they keep calling these meetings, bringing in more people, and eventually they get enough people to create these documents of these fake slates of electors. But they don't succeed in actually, getting Mr. Bowers, for example, leadership in the state house to call a special session. He doesn't have the authority to do that, but they just keep telling him and others, this is replicated around the country, that they have this authority to just reject results, call sessions in state legislatures, kind of depending on the state and the circumstances, just essentially telling them, just figure out a way to break the law so you can send us what we want, is the result that really came out of that.
And it involved Donald Trump. I want to play some of the part of the testimony that you and I are talking about.
To quote the former president, during the conversation, he told me the election was rigged and that I won Arizona, unquote. Did you have such a conversation with the president?
I did have a conversation with the president. That certainly isn't it, but there were parts of it that are true, but there are parts that are not, sir.
And the part that I read you, is that false?
Anywhere, anyone, anytime has said that I said the election was rigged, that would not be true.
Speaker Bowers, did the president call you again in later in December?
He did, sir.
Did you tell the president in that second call that you supported him, that you voted for him, but that you were not going to do anything illegal for him?
I did, sir.
Nevertheless, his lawyer, John Eastman, called you some days later on June 4th, 2021. And he did have a very specific ask that would have required you to do just what you had already told the president you wouldn't do, something that would violate your oath. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I said, you're asking me to do something that's never been done in history, the history of the United States, and I'm going to put my state through that without sufficient proof, and that's going to be good enough with me? That I would put us through that, my state, that I swore to uphold both in Constitution and in law? No, sir. He said, well, that's my suggestion would be just do it and let the courts figure it all out.
This testimony feels like the other half of the coin from federal Judge Carter's ability to assert that John Eastman and Donald Trump likely committed felonies. I mean, this is witness testimony from a lifelong Republican who's basically testifying that the president knowingly asked him to break the law, knowing the plot was illegal. Tell me the importance in terms of questions that are swirling in the arena of public opinion about Trump's criminality.
Well, I think that this was incredibly compelling and moving, and the fact that we heard from the former president today through his own words, the pressure that he put on Secretary Raffensperger, the account of the calls that he had with Mr. Bowers. It really was, hearing directly what the president said, who he said it to, and what kind of pressure was applied. And again, like we've seen, people stand up and do the right thing, not cave to that pressure, say, I'm going to follow the laws of this state and of our nation, and we're not going to throw out the electors or the popular vote of our state. We're not going to take these fake slates of electors. And today, just even more people implicated in this. We have a member of Congress, a senator, others, who were cited by our witnesses as having participated in this plot.
The evidence that was provided today that was perhaps most for those of us who follow this every day, there are a ton of questions about who Donald Trump was talking about, right? When he tells acting AG Rosen and Deputy Acting AG Donahue, leave the rest to my basically the R's in Congress. We got one of the names of those R's that Donald Trump had in mind when he asked DOJ to declare the election corrupt, and that was Ron Johnson. Tell me the significance of that anecdote and that testimony.
Well, it clearly shows that there were others who were cooperating with the president and people close to him to carry out this plot. And essentially, we've got to get these slates of fake electors delivered to the former vice president, who's acting as the president of the Senate, so that he will consider them and use them in this plan that we're pressuring him to carry out. So I think it's one glimpse into perhaps a bigger picture of the large number of people who were involved in trying to carry this out. So I think was very, very telling that we heard that directly from a witness.
Is there any doubt in your mind that Donald Trump directed or participated in a conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding of Congress?
There is no doubt in my mind. We've laid this out in multiple ways, and I had read the testimony of some of these witnesses, but hearing them today, and for example, seeing Speaker Bowers' conviction and the way he delivered his testimony, it reinforced to me that the former president, he tried to use his office in this fake plan, scheme, all of this, many levers, many people around the country in these swing states to try to corrupt the results of the election, to deliver these slates of fake electors, to pressure the former vice president, and to change the outcome of an election to something different than what the American people voted for. So